It was 6:12 a.m. when my phone buzzed against the nightstand. One short message. One line that cracked something deep inside me. You're no longer part of this family. When your mother cuts you out of the family, what would you do? Walk away or fight back? Stay with me, because this story proves that silence can be the loudest revenge of all. I sat up in bed, the glow of the screen lighting my wrinkled hands. For a moment I thought I was dreaming, that maybe she'd sent it by mistake. My mother wasn't perfect, but even she wouldn't disown her only daughter over text. But the longer I stared, the colder my chest felt. The words weren't followed by an explanation, no typo, no accidental emoji, just a period. The final. Why? But didn't hit send. What was the point? When someone wants to cut you out, they don't give you reasons, they give you silence and watch how you handle it. I put the phone down, breathing slow like I used to before walking into a courtroom back when I worked as a clerk. Stay calm. Stay quiet. Collect everything before you react. Downstairs the house was still. The coffee machine blinked its red light, waiting. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost, half awake, half trying not to collapse. Outside, the sky was pale gray, the kind that makes mornings feel heavier than nights. I poured a cup of coffee, no sugar, no cream, just bitter and hot the way I felt. That's when another notification came. From her again. Don't come by the house anymore. Your brothers and I talked. It's better this way. My fingers tightened around the mug. The steam fogged my glasses. She'd already discussed it with them, like I was a stranger being voted off some family council. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just opened the kitchen drawer, pulled out the folder labeled Mom, Expenses. It was thick, full of printed bank slips and copies of checks. Every loan, every favor, every just until next month. $42,000 over 8 years. Money I could have used for my own life, but I gave because she said, family helps family. I slid the folder onto the table and stared at it while the coffee cooled. My pulse slowed. The sadness shifted into something else. Not anger yet, but awareness. She'd cut me out, but I still held every proof of what I'd given. That thought stayed with me like a small, glowing ember in the dark. At 8, my neighbor Nancy knocked on the door. She's the kind who talks before thinking. You all right? I saw your mother's post on Facebook. I frowned. What post? She handed me her phone. There it was, my mother's smiling face beside my brother's. The caption read, "Proud to keep the family strong and honest. Some people don't belong in this home anymore, and that's okay." The comments were full of little heart emojis and "so true" from her church friends. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. Thanks, Nancy. Appreciate it. She hesitated. If you need to talk. I'm fine, I said, closing the door gently. I wasn't fine. I stood there, staring at the lock. The same kind I'd installed on Mom's house years ago when she said she didn't feel safe. I'd even paid the handyman. The irony almost made me laugh. Around noon I drove to her place. The wind carried the faint smell of rain and the neighborhood looked smaller than I remembered. When I reached her driveway I noticed something new. My name was gone from the mailbox. Used to read Marion and Family, now it just said the Watsons. My stomach turned. I got out of the car, clutching the spare key I'd kept since last Christmas. But when I tried it, the key jammed. She changed the locks. Of course she had. Through the window I saw her, my mother in her favorite yellow robe, sitting at the table with my brothers. There was coffee, laughter, even a cake. My brother Dean said something that made her cover her mouth to hide a giggle. My other brother Kevin pointed toward the window. I froze. Mom turned. Our eyes met through the glass. She didn't wave. She didn't even flinch. She just picked up her cup and looked away. I should have left then. But instead I rang the bell. Once. Twice. Finally, Dean opened the door just a crack. You shouldn't be here, Marion. Mom changed the locks? I asked, keeping my voice calm. He nodded. It's better for everyone. Everyone except me, you mean? He sighed. You made things complicated. You were always keeping receipts, making her feel guilty about the money. It wasn't healthy. I laughed quietly. Receipts aren't guilt, Dean. They're proof. He shifted uncomfortably. You really should leave. Then Mom's voice floated from behind him. Let her say what she wants to say. Dean stepped aside. I walked in slowly, my heels clicking against the tiled floor. The house smelled of lemon polish and betrayal. Every picture frame on the wall was familiar. except one. My photo with Dad at his retirement dinner was gone, replaced by one of Mom with my brothers and their wives. A perfect family portrait without me. "Morning, Mom," I said softly. She looked up, her smile polite, almost rehearsed. "Morning. I thought you understood my message." "I did," I said. "I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a mistake." It wasn't. Dean and Kevin watched, arms crossed, silent judges in a courtroom I never agreed to enter. "You really think you can erase me with a text?" I asked. Mom folded her hands. "You've always been dramatic. We're just setting boundaries. You've caused too much tension about money. Families shouldn't mix love with finances." I tilted my head. "Then maybe you shouldn't have asked for $42,000 of it." Kevin muttered. "Here we go again." Mom's lips pressed together. "I'm not discussing this in front of them." "Then maybe discuss it in front of a lawyer," I said quietly. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, the first sign of fear quickly replaced by annoyance. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "I keep everything, Mom. Every message, every check, every transfer. You taught me that, remember?" The room went still. Even Dean stopped fidgeting. Outside, rain started tapping the window pane. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the clock ticking, every sound magnified in the silence that followed. Mom stood up slowly. "I'm sorry you feel wronged, Marion, but this is final. You're no longer part of this family." I nodded once. "Then return the $42,000 I sent you." Her hand trembled. "Excuse me." "You heard me. I'll take a check or cash, whichever's easier." Dean scoffed. "You're unbelievable." I looked at him. I learned from the best. Mom's face flushed. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Maybe," I said, stepping closer, "but at least I'm not pretending lies are love." For a second she looked older, smaller. Then she lifted her chin. "Leave my house." I smiled, a small, tired smile that felt like exhaling years of pain. "It's funny you call it your house. You used my money for the down payment." That's when Kevin slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Dad's gone and you're tearing this family apart." I looked at him steadily. "Dad's gone, but he taught me to stand for truth. You just don't like that truth has a paper trail." Mom's face hardened. "If you walk out that door, don't come back." I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone and scrolled to a folder labeled proof. She watched as I turned the screen toward her. A neat list of transfers with her signature on half of them. Her breath caught. "You kept all that?" "Every cent, every promise," I said. "Just in case you ever forgot what family really costs." Her eyes flicked to my brothers, then back to me. "You think you're so clever." "No," I said softly. "Just thorough." I turned to leave. Rain had started pouring outside, blurring the driveway into silver streaks. As I opened the door, Mom's voice cracked behind me, not angry this time, just scared. "You wouldn't do anything stupid, would you?" I paused, looking back over my shoulder. "No, Mom. I don't do stupid things. I do documented ones." The door shut quietly behind me. The rain hit my face, cool and sharp. I walked to my car without looking back, the echo of her words following me like a curse I'd already begun to break. When I slid into the driver's seat, I checked my phone one last time. The last message still glowed at the top of the screen. "You're no longer part of this family." I took a screenshot. Then I whispered to myself, "We'll see." The engine started. The wipers moved in rhythm with my heartbeat. Somewhere deep inside, the sadness hardened into resolve. I wasn't just cut off, I was being set free. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly what to do next. The wipers kept time as I drove back toward town, each stroke clearing just enough rain for me to see the road, and the pieces of my life that still belonged to her. The drizzle softened to mist by the time I pulled into my driveway, the one place I thought was truly mine. But even as I parked, a strange thought whispered through me. What if this house was next? I sat there for a minute, listening to the cooling tick of the engine. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels staged. The mail truck passed, leaving a small envelope on my box. When I stepped out, the wind carried the faint scent of wet pine and distant thunder. I peeled the envelope open right there by the gate. It was a property tax notice, but the sender wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to the Watson Family Trust. I froze. That wasn't my legal entity. My name wasn't anywhere on it. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step on the stairs. I went inside, dripping, shoes squeaking against the hardwood I'd refinished myself last spring. I set the letter on the counter, took off my coat and stared at the refrigerator covered in family pictures. Most of them years old, fading around the edges. My mother was in nearly every one. Her smile looked harmless then. Now it looked rehearsed. I brewed tea instead of coffee. Caffeine made my hands shake and I needed them steady. As the kettle hissed, I opened the drawer again, the folder marked Mom. Expenses. I added the property tax letter to the back of it, slid the folder into my canvas tote, and told myself I'd stop by the county records office tomorrow. That night I barely slept. Every creak in the house made me think of footsteps that didn't belong here. Around 3 a.m. I found myself wandering into the guest room, the one filled with boxes from when Mom had stayed with me during her hip surgery. I never went in there much. The smell of her perfume still clung to the curtains, that floral powder scent she loved. Half asleep, I opened one of the boxes. Inside were receipts, contractor invoices, a plumber's bill, even grocery deliveries, all in my handwriting but charged to her address. She must have left them behind without realizing it. Or maybe she had realized it and didn't care. Among the papers was a photocopy of a quitclaim deed. My heart pounded as I held it up to the light. It had my name, Marion D. Watson, and her signature beside mine. I never remembered signing it. The date was 2 years ago, right after Dad died. My mind went back to that week. Mom crying, asking me to sign a few routine forms to help settle his estate. I'd signed a stack without reading, trusting her. I hadn't just helped her handle paperwork. I'd handed over my rights to the house I helped her buy. I sank into the armchair, clutching the paper. The rain outside picked up again, rattling the windows like an audience gasping at the wrong moment. My throat burned. "You clever woman," I whispered. "You actually did it." At sunrise, I drove to the county office. The clerk, a polite young man with glasses, searched the system and nodded. "Yes, ma'am, ownership transferred 2 years ago to the Watson Family Trust. Your mother is the primary trustee." I forced my voice steady. "And my name?" He shook his head. "Removed upon transfer." The air felt thin. "Can I get a copy?" "Sure." He printed the document, stamped it and handed it over. The ink was still warm. Outside the world looked unreal, too bright, too sharp. I walked to my car, clutching the papers like they were fragile glass. Inside, I laid them on the passenger seat next to my tote and whispered, "You took my house too." By the time I got home, the shock had turned into a kind of cold focus. I made a list, everything she'd borrowed, everything she'd signed, everything she'd said. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about pattern, intention, deceit. Around noon, Dean called. His name flashing on my phone made my chest tighten. "Hey," he said cautiously. "Look, about yesterday, Mom's upset. She didn't mean to hurt you." "She changed the locks," I said. "And she forged my signature." There was silence, then a scoff. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. The trust was Dad's idea." "Dad's idea?" I repeated slowly. "Dad couldn't sign anything that year. He was in hospice." Dean's tone hardened. "Don't start digging things up. It won't end well." "Whose end are you worried about?" I asked. He hung up. That told me enough. They all knew. The next day, I visited my father's lawyer, Mr. Parker. He was in his 70s now, hair white as paper, still keeping an office above the post office downtown. When he saw me, he smiled softly. "Marion Watson. Been years." "Too many," I said, handing him the deed copy. "I think my mother used my trust to move assets." He adjusted his glasses, reading line by line. His brow furrowed. "These aren't standard clauses. This was rewritten after your father's passing. You didn't sign this, did you?" "I did something. But not this exact form." He sighed. Then she substituted a signature page. "I've seen it before, unfortunately." My stomach turned. "Can it be undone?" "Possibly. But you'll need evidence. Bank transfers, communication, proof of intent." "I have all of it," I said. He nodded, impressed. "Then start gathering everything. Quietly." As I left his office, his voice followed me down the hall. "Don't confront her again until you're ready. People hide their worst selves behind family." On the drive back, I stopped at the old diner off Route 14. Same cracked leather booths. Same waitress named Judy who'd been serving pie there since the 90s. She brought me a coffee and said, "Haven't seen you with your mom lately. Everything all right?" I smiled faintly. "Just sorting some paperwork." He poured more coffee. "You always were the sensible one." That line stuck with me. The sensible one. Maybe that's why they thought they could outsmart me. That evening, I returned home and pulled every document out of the drawer. Bank slips, wire confirmations, text messages printed from my phone. My dining table disappeared under stacks of paper. I arranged them chronologically, labeling each pile with sticky notes. It looked like chaos, but to me it was clarity. Around 9, the doorbell rang. I peeked through the curtain. Kevin stood outside, hands in his jacket pockets. My pulse quickened, but I opened the door. "What do you want?" I asked. "Mom's worried you're planning something," he said, stepping inside without invitation. "She should be." He sighed. "You're blowing this out of proportion. The money, the house, it's all staying in the family. Except I'm not part of it, right?" He looked away. "You chose that." "No," I said, voice low. "She chose greed." He rubbed his forehead. "You always twist everything." "Funny," I said. "That's what people say when the truth sounds different than their story." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "If you make this legal, Mom will be ruined. She's not young anymore. Think about that." I stared at him, seeing not my brother but my mother's echo. "I have. Every night since she stole my name." He shook his head and left without another word. When the door clicked shut, I locked it and slid the chain across. My heart was pounding, but my mind felt strangely calm. I walked back to the table, picked up one of the folders, and noticed something I'd missed before. A receipt from the bank, notarization dated the same day as the forged deed. My mother's handwriting signed the witness line. That was it. The proof Mr. Parker needed. I sat down, staring at it, and for a long time I didn't move. Outside, the rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the roof in slow, steady beats. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and fell silent. I whispered, "You shouldn't have underestimated me, Mom." Later that night, I walked through my house, and realized something cruelly poetic. Almost every object in it had come from her. The dining set she picked, the curtains she insisted on, even the chipped ceramic vase she'd bought at a church fair. Everything carried her fingerprint, like she'd been preparing to reclaim it all. I went to the fireplace, opened the metal box hidden behind the grate, and took out the small USB drive I'd kept since Dad's passing. It held copies of every legal document he'd left behind, including insurance records and correspondence with his attorney. I hadn't looked at it in years. When I plugged it into my laptop, one folder caught my eye: Property, Final Instructions. Inside was a scanned letter in Dad's handwriting. "If anything happens to me, make sure Marion's contribution to the house is protected. She deserves that security." I sat back, tears stinging my eyes. He had tried to protect me, and she had buried his words. By midnight, I had all I needed: evidence of fraud, intent, and moral decay disguised as family loyalty. I closed the laptop, exhaled, and looked around the house one last time. It still looked like hers, but soon it wouldn't. Somewhere between exhaustion and resolve, I felt that same quiet calm from the morning return. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger gives them power. I was patient, deliberate, and armed with truth. The next morning, I'd take everything to the lawyer. But for now, I simply whispered into the empty room. "This house may not have my name on paper, but it will again." I turned off the light, leaving the documents spread across the table like a map leading back to everything that was stolen from me. And for the first time in weeks, I slept without fear, because the woman they thought was broken was already rebuilding her case. Morning came softly, gray light pushing through the curtains, brushing across the piles of papers still spread across my dining table. I sat there before sunrise, robe wrapped tight around me, rereading every document for the 100th time. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I didn't care. The silence was heavy, yet for the first time it felt like power, not loneliness. I'd always believed justice needed noise. Courtroom voices, raised arguments, someone pounding a desk. But that morning I realized revenge begins in quiet. Quiet planning, quiet proof, quiet patience. I opened my laptop and made a new folder labeled Restoration. Inside it, I scanned and named every file carefully: dates, amounts, and signatures. It felt like building armor one piece at a time. My fingers shook not from fear but from certainty. At 9 sharp I called Mr. Parker. I have everything, I told him. He sounded pleased. Bring it all. We'll go over what's admissible. I dressed simply, black slacks, cream sweater, no jewelry. Nothing dramatic, just a woman handling business. When I arrived, his office smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper. He gestured toward the stack of files in my arms. Looks like you came prepared. I'm done being naive, I said. We spent hours cross-checking documents. He highlighted key details. My mother's handwriting on witness lines, notarization mismatches, transaction notes with her initials. Each mark was another crack in her armor. When we finished, he looked up. We can file a petition to contest the deed transfer and freeze trust assets. But that'll alert her immediately. That's fine, I said. Let her wonder first. He raised an eyebrow. Meaning she won't know I've filed until it's too late. He smiled faintly. I always did like subtle clients. On the drive home, autumn leaves tumbled across the road like sparks, red, brittle, almost burning. I thought about my mother, about how easily she'd rewritten my place in her world. It wasn't just about property. It was about identity. She wanted to erase me the way she'd removed my photo from her wall. I couldn't undo that emotionally, but legally, that was different. That evening, I stopped by the small print shop near the square. The owner, an old friend named Ruth, greeted me with her usual warmth. Haven't seen you in a while, Marion, she said. What are we printing today? Evidence, I replied, half smiling. Double copies, color, and sealed folders. Ruth chuckled, not realizing I wasn't joking. As the printer hummed, the rhythmic sound steadied my heartbeat. Each sheet sliding out felt like one more brick in the wall I was building between me and their lies. On my way out, I bought a cheap prepaid phone from the convenience store. I had a plan forming, not illegal, just strategic. I'd use the new number for all legal correspondence so none of them could track or interfere. That night, I sat in my car across from my mother's house. Lights glowed inside, shadows moved across the curtains. Dean's car was in the driveway. Kevin's too. They were probably discussing how to handle me, just like they always did when someone stopped obeying her. I didn't go near the house. I only watched. From that distance, the laughter drifting through the window felt almost unreal. A family tableau built on stolen trust. I whispered to myself, keep laughing while you can. Back home, I opened my late father's USB again, scanning deeper into the folders. I found old email drafts between him and the bank officer. Messages that mentioned my name and contributions to the house down payment. One line read, funds from Marion were essential for the mortgage. Her equity should be recorded accordingly. I stared at that sentence until the words blurred. Dad had tried to do right by me. Mom had buried it. But now his words would resurrect everything she'd hidden. The next morning, I met with Mr. Parker again. I showed him the emails. He nodded slowly. This changes things. We'll request a full audit of the trust's formation. If your father's intent is documented, the entire transfer can be reversed. A spark of cautious relief flickered inside me. How long will that take? A few weeks. Maybe less. In the meantime, do nothing that looks confrontational. Let her feel safe. That was easy. Pretending came naturally now. Days passed quietly. I kept routines normal. Groceries, walks, even church on Sundays. People greeted me like always, unaware that beneath my calm smile, I was dismantling a legacy brick by brick. One afternoon at the market, I ran into Kevin's wife, Janet. She smiled too wide. Hi, Marion. Mom said you've been keeping to yourself. I returned the smile. Just staying busy. Paperwork, mostly. She laughed nervously. You know how she gets dramatic. But she loves you. Of course, I said softly. She loves anything with her name on it. Janet blinked, unsure what I meant, then excused herself quickly. I watched her leave, imagining how the gossip would start trickling back home before dinner. Perfect. Let them feel uneasy without knowing why. That evening, I received an email from the county clerk's office confirming receipt of the property dispute petition, quietly filed through Mr. Parker's assistant. I stared at the notification, my heart racing. It was done. The wheels were turning. For the first time in months, I opened a bottle of wine, one my father had given me years ago and told me to save for a real victory. I poured a small glass, lifted it toward the empty room and said, to patience. 2 days later, the first ripple hit. Mom called. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Marian, she said, her voice honeyed but strained, the bank called me today. Something about the trust verification. Did you do something? I kept my tone mild. Just housekeeping. Making sure all records reflect what belongs to who. She laughed thinly. That's not your concern anymore. Maybe not yours either, I said, then hung up gently. That night I half expected her to show up at my door. He didn't. Instead I got a text from Dean. Why are you dragging Mom into legal trouble? I typed back because she dragged me out of my home. No reply. The next morning an unfamiliar car pulled into my driveway. A woman stepped out, mid-30s, confident posture, briefcase in hand. Mrs. Watson? She asked. I'm Leah, Mr. Parker's paralegal. He wanted these documents delivered securely. I invited her in. She placed a thick envelope on the table. These are the filings. You'll get official notice soon. We're also requesting a forensic handwriting expert for signature comparison. I nodded, overwhelmed but grateful. Thank you, Leah. You have no idea what this means. She smiled. I think I do. After she left, I sat staring at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside were neatly tabbed sections. Evidence exhibits, witness statements, transfer dates. My life, printed and numbered. That night I drove again, not to watch them but to return something. I parked near Mom's street and quietly slipped an unmarked envelope into her mailbox. Inside was a single photocopy of 1 page. The handwritten note from Dad's file that proved he intended the house for me. No threats, no message. Just truth delivered like a slow-burning fuse. Driving home, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was simply waiting. Over the next few days, small things began to shift. Mom stopped posting cheerful family photos. Dean's wife unfollowed me online. Kevin left a voicemail saying we should talk this out. I didn't respond. Every silence from me became another question they couldn't answer. One afternoon the phone rang again. This time it was Mr. Parker. The court accepted the filing. They've frozen all trust distributions pending review. My knees went weak. Already, he said. She'll get notice by mail within 48 hours. I hung up and sank into my chair, hands trembling. The quiet plan had worked. All those sleepless nights, the folders, the scanning, it had all been worth it. Still a small part of me ached. She was my mother. I had wanted her to love me, not fight me. But then I remembered her looking away through the window while I stood in the rain. That image hardened the ache into purpose. That evening the sky turned deep violet, heavy with another storm. I opened the windows just enough to let the scent of rain drift in. I gathered the leftover papers from the table, stacked them neatly and placed them inside the metal box by the fireplace. My father's letter went on top. For a long moment I just stood there watching the lightning flash across the dark. It illuminated the room, the same house she'd tried to erase me from, and in that flash I realized something simple but powerful. I didn't need to scream to be heard. I just needed the truth to reach the right desk. I whispered to the empty air, this time I'm not asking for justice. I'm ensuring it. Outside, thunder rolled low and steady, as if the sky itself was acknowledging the quiet war I'd begun. And somewhere across town, my mother would soon open her mailbox, find that letter in my father's handwriting, and realize that her daughter, the one she dismissed as weak, had already rewritten the story she tried to steal. The next morning the sky was still swollen with rain. I woke before dawn, the air cool and damp against my skin, and I knew, today was the day she'd find out. The will reading had been scheduled for 11 a.m. at Mr. Parker's office. I hadn't been invited, of course I hadn't. But that didn't mean I wouldn't be there. I brewed black coffee the same way my father used to make it when he needed clarity before a long day. The steam curled up from the mug, fogging my glasses. I watched the condensation drip down, slow and deliberate, the way truth always travels before it lands. At 9 my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. Are you attending the meeting? Dean. I typed back yes. No emojis. No explanations. Let them guess what that yes meant. I chose my outfit carefully. Gray blazer, black slacks, pearl earrings. Understated, serious, impossible to dismiss. When I looked in the mirror I saw someone my mother wouldn't recognize anymore. Someone who no longer begged for a place at her table. Someone who owned her own. The courthouse clock struck 10 when I parked outside Parker and Associates. The street smelled faintly of rain and asphalt. I could already see their cars lined up along the curb. My brother's, my mother's silver sedan. My heartbeat stayed steady, calm like a slow drum before a verdict. Inside, the waiting room was thick with quiet tension. My brother stood near the window whispering. Mom sat on the leather couch, sunglasses on though we were indoors. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I just stopped looking up to her. "Marian," she said finally, voice cool as stone. "You didn't have to come." "I know," I said. "But I'm listed as an interested party." Her mouth twitched. "Interested? That's one word for it." Mr. Parker entered then, carrying a thick file. His assistant, Leah, followed with a notepad. He gave me a small nod, professional but reassuring. "Let's begin, shall we?" We moved into the conference room. The air smelled faintly of polish and coffee grounds. Parker sat at the head of the long oak table, opened the folder and began reading. "This is the last will and testament of Harold James Watson." Dad's name filled the room like a ghost. For a moment none of us breathed. He went through the formalities, debts cleared, personal effects, percentages. My mother's expression stayed calm, practiced. She'd probably rehearsed it in the mirror, preparing to collect what she believed she'd secured long ago. Then Parker paused. "Before distribution of assets, there are new claims pending review under the Watson Family Trust." Dean frowned. "What claims?" Parker looked up. "Filed by Mrs. Marian Watson, regarding disputed ownership of the primary residence and associated funds." Mom's sunglasses came off. Her eyes, pale gray like mine, narrowed. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious in legal matters," Parker replied gently. The room went still. I heard the faint hum of the ceiling vent, the ticking of Parker's wristwatch. Dean leaned forward. "This is ridiculous. She's trying to steal the house." I met his eyes. "Funny. That's exactly what she did." Mom's hand slammed on the table. "Enough. You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Mom," I said quietly. "I'm just showing my homework." Parker cleared his throat and pulled a black envelope from the folder, the same one I'd given him weeks ago. "These are notarized records of monetary transfers totaling $42,000 from Marian Watson to Margaret Watson, used toward mortgage and property expenses. Accompanying documents show acknowledgement of repayment intent." Kevin looked confused. "Repayment?" Parker continued calmly. "Yes. Your mother signed informal IOUs over several years. Not legally binding on their own, but combined with bank evidence, they establish implied equity." Mom's face drained of color. "Those were gifts. Family help." "Then why sign them?" I asked. "And why forge my name on a deed transfer 2 years later?" Her lips parted, then closed again. For the first time she looked genuinely afraid. Dean tried to intervene. "You can't prove that signature isn't hers." Parker handed him another folder. "Forensic comparison already submitted. The report speaks for itself." The pages fluttered as he opened them, black and white proof, microscopic magnifications, signature overlays. Each one another nail in the coffin of her lie. Mom turned to me, voice trembling. "You planned this?" "Yes," I said. Quietly. "Because that's the only language you listen to." Leah handed Parker another sheet, the letter from my father. Parker read it aloud. "If anything happens to me, ensure Marian's contribution to the house is protected. She deserves that security." The room fell silent again, but this time the silence was thick with realization. Mom whispered, "Where did you get that?" "From Dad," I said softly. "He left it where you'd never look, a place called honesty." She leaned back, trembling. Dean stood abruptly, knocking his chair against the wall. "We're not doing this. This is private family business." Parker's tone sharpened. "It became legal business when fraud occurred." Kevin rubbed his forehead. "This can't be happening." I looked at him gently. "It already did. 2 years ago. You just didn't notice." Parker spoke again. "Until the audit concludes, all trust assets are hereby frozen. Distribution of the house or funds is prohibited." Mom exhaled sharply, a sound between a sob and a hiss. "You've destroyed this family." "No, Mom," I said quietly. You did that when you sold honesty for a deed. For a long minute no one moved. Outside, thunder rolled again, low, distant, like an echo of justice arriving late but certain. Then Parker closed the file. That concludes today's reading. Further proceedings will continue pending review. You're all free to go. I stood smoothing my blazer. My legs felt steady, anchored. My mother remained seated, staring at the table as though the wood might swallow her whole. I almost pitied her. Almost. As I turned to leave, she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. You think you've won? I paused by the door. No. I just stopped losing. Out in the hallway I took a deep breath. The air smelled cleaner there, lighter. Leah walked beside me carrying her notepad. You handled that well, she said. Years of practice staying quiet, I replied. We stepped outside into the drizzle. Across the street my brothers argued near the cars. Dean gestured wildly. Kevin's shoulders slumped. Mom sat in the back seat staring out the window at nothing. I watched them for a long moment. The same family that once made me feel small now shrinking in their own shadows. Leah touched my arm gently. Are you all right? I will be, I said. But not yet. She smiled faintly. Justice has a way of catching up even when it walks slow. Maybe, I said, but I made sure it had directions this time. I drove home with the radio off, letting the rhythm of the rain fill the silence. Each drop felt like punctuation every mile a sentence finished. When I pulled into my driveway I saw something strange. A small envelope wedged in the screen door. No name, no return address. Inside was a note written in my mother's handwriting. Please let's talk. No lawyers. Just us. My pulse quickened. For a moment I considered ignoring it. Then I thought of Dad's voice, calm and steady. Always hear the other side before you close the door. I placed the note on the table beside the still sealed evidence box. The temptation to respond tugged at me, but the lawyer's warning echoed louder. Let her feel safe before you move. So I waited. Hours passed. The rain stopped, but the house still smelled like wet leaves and paper ink. Evening crept in, slow, golden light sliding across the floorboards. I sat there, motionless, rehearsing every word I might say if she came. At 7 p.m. headlights swept across my window. I didn't move. A car door shut. Footsteps crunched on the path. A gentle knock, then her voice through the door. Miriam, please. I need to explain. I stayed seated, hands folded. I wanted her to feel the weight of silence she'd once used against me. After a minute she knocked again, softer this time. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Your father wanted. I rose and opened the door just enough for her to see my face. Dad wanted fairness, I said quietly. That's all I'm asking for. Tears welled in her eyes, catching the porch light. I thought if I gave everything to the boys they'd stay close. I didn't want to die alone. I studied her, really studied her. The trembling chin, the wrinkles carved by years of control. You didn't have to steal from me to be loved. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. You chose deception. I chose documentation. That's the difference between us. She broke then, shoulders shaking. Please, I'll make it right. Just stop the case. I hesitated, and that was all the vulnerability I allowed her. You'll get your chance to make it right, I said. In court. I closed the door softly, locking it once, then twice. Her footsteps faded into the night. Leaning against the door, I let out a long, steady breath. My heart hurt, yes, but beneath that ache was something fierce and clean, closure forming, slow and sure. I turned off the porch light, whispering into the quiet. This isn't revenge, Mom. It's consequence. Then I walked back to the table, sat down beside my father's letter, and waited for morning. The morning that would bring the final hearing, and with it, the end of every lie that had ever carried our family name. Morning crept in slowly, brushing pale gold across the curtains. I hadn't slept, I didn't need to. The house felt still, like it was holding its breath with me. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m., final review of the trust, the last act of a story that had taken nearly a lifetime to write. I brewed coffee, set the cup beside Dad's letter, and whispered, "We're almost there." The drive downtown was quiet. The same route I'd taken dozens of times now, but today every turn felt different, lighter. The courthouse lot glistened from last night's rain, and the air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and lilacs blooming along the fence. It reminded me of the mornings when Dad used to drive me to school. He'd tap the steering wheel and say, "Silence is power if you know when to use it." Inside the courthouse, Leah met me near the elevators. She carried her tablet and a calm I envied. "You ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," I said. She smiled. "You don't have to say much today. Just let the documents speak." We entered the hearing room, smaller than I imagined. My brothers were already there, sitting stiffly at the table, suits too new, expressions rehearsed. My mother sat between them, wearing the same yellow robe-colored blouse she'd worn that first day I confronted her. Maybe superstition, maybe defiance. Her eyes met mine, searching for weakness. I gave her none. Judge Rosen entered, silver hair pinned back, eyes sharp behind thin glasses. She took her seat, adjusted her papers and said, "Let's begin." Mr. Parker stood first. His voice was calm, factual, each word deliberate. He outlined the timeline, the transfers, the forged deed, the hidden trust. As he spoke, I watched Mom's fingers twitch against the table, her knuckles whitening. When the judge asked if she disputed the handwriting analysis, her attorney cleared his throat and said, "We reserve comment pending independent review." Translation: they had nothing. Then came the moment I'd both dreaded and waited for, the playing of the recording. Parker connected his laptop to the court monitor and pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room. "She'll never know. We'll move it under the family trust before she notices." Dean's voice followed, low and nervous. "But what if the bank asks?" "I'll handle the bank," she said. "She's too sentimental to question me." The sound of my own heartbeat thundered in my ears. Kevin closed his eyes. Dean's jaw clenched. Mom's face went pale, then red, then ghost white again. The judge paused the playback. "Mrs. Watson," she said evenly, "do you wish to explain this?" For a long moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Then my mother's voice, small and trembling, broke the stillness. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted to keep the family together." The judge's expression softened but stayed firm. "Fraud is not a family bonding exercise, Mrs. Watson." Laughter rippled quietly from the gallery, not cruel, just incredulous. I didn't join in. My silence was enough. After an hour of testimony, the judge announced a short recess. I stepped into the hallway, needing air. Leah handed me a bottle of water. "You okay?" "I am," I said. "For the first time, I really am." When we reconvened, Parker presented the final exhibit, the letter in Dad's handwriting. Judge Rosen read it slowly, aloud, the way one reads scripture. "Ensure Marion's contribution to the house is protected. She deserves that security." The courtroom quieted again. Even the clerks stopped typing. My brothers looked down, ashamed. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. After a pause, the judge spoke. "The evidence supports the petitioner's claim. The transfer was fraudulent and executed without informed consent. The property and associated funds are hereby restored to Marion Watson." The words washed over me like warm rain. I closed my eyes, letting them sink in. The courtroom blurred at the edges, just sound, breath, and release. Then the gavel struck. Once. The final. Mom gasped softly, almost inaudibly. Dean whispered, "Mom, say something," but she didn't. She just stared at the judge, lips parted, eyes wet but dry of remorse. As we gathered our papers, she rose and turned to me. "You've humiliated me," she said hoarsely. I looked at her, calm. "No, Mom. You humiliated yourself. I just brought the receipts." She flinched at the word, recognizing it from that first text exchange months ago. It hung between us like a bell that couldn't be unrung. Outside the courthouse, sunlight broke through the clouds. The pavement steamed gently. I stood on the steps, breathing in the warmth, feeling the weight lift. Leah squeezed my hand, then left me to have the moment alone. My brothers lingered by their car, arguing in hushed tones. I didn't listen. I walked toward my own car, every step lighter than the last. When I opened the door, I caught my reflection in the window. Older, yes, but sharper, alive. On the drive home, I turned the radio on for the first time in months. An old song played. Something from the 70s, my parents' wedding song. I smiled at the irony. The lyrics about love and forever drifted out the open window and disappeared into the wind. When I reached my house again, the afternoon sun had dried the porch. A courier envelope lay by the door. Official documents confirming the court's ruling. I held it for a long moment before taking it inside. I set it on the table beside Dad's letter and poured myself a cup of tea. The house smelled of cedar and quiet victory. Around 6, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Mom. Her voice was frail, almost unrecognizable. "Marianne, I don't know what to say." "You could start with the truth," I said gently. "I thought I'd lose everything," she whispered. "You did," I said, "but not because I wanted that. You did because you chose lies over love." She started to cry softly. For the first time, it didn't pierce me. It sounded distant, like rain on a roof I no longer lived under. "I'm alone," she said. I swallowed hard. "That was never what I wanted, Mom. But it's what you built." There was silence on the line, long, fragile, honest. I didn't hang up. I just listened until the sound of her sobs faded into quiet breathing. When she finally whispered, "I'm sorry," I closed my eyes. "I know," I said. "Goodbye, Mom." I set the phone down and felt tears slip free, not of sadness but of release. Years of emotional weight dissolving into something lighter. Later that evening, I walked through each room of the house. The sunset poured through the windows, gilding everything it touched. The dining table, the framed photo of Dad, the worn rug she once mocked for being too plain. It was beautiful in its simplicity, just like the life I wanted all along. In the living room, I lit the fireplace even though the air was warm. The crackle filled the silence like applause. I took out the last envelope, the one Ruth had printed weeks ago with duplicate evidence copies. I tossed it into the flames, watching the edges curl, the ink blur. The proof had done its job. I didn't need it anymore. Smoke swirled upward, soft and silver. I whispered, "It's over." The clock struck 8. Outside, crickets began their nightly song. I sat on the couch, letting the rhythm of the house settle back into peace. On the mantel sat a small framed photo, me and Dad in front of the old house. I traced the edge of the glass and smiled. "You were right, Dad," I murmured. "Silence is power." My revenge hadn't come from shouting or from anger. It had come from letting the truth walk in quietly and take its rightful seat. As the fire dimmed, I wrote a short note and pinned it to the folder labeled Restoration. "To anyone who finds this, keep your records. Keep your dignity. And when they call you weak, let silence answer for you." I placed the folder in the cabinet, closed the drawer and turned off the lights. The house glowed faintly under the moon, steady and safe. Standing in the doorway, I looked out at the yard, the same yard where my mother once planted roses. They were blooming again, soft pink against the dark. I walked out barefoot, the grass cool beneath my feet, and touched one of the petals. It was fragile but alive, just like me. The night air was still, the sky clear at last. Somewhere far off, a train horn sounded, long, low and final. I whispered to the quiet world around me, "This is my peace. This is my revenge." And for the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt. It healed. If this story touched your heart, hit like and subscribe for more powerful revenge stories told through the eyes of women who refuse to stay silent. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today?